Welcome, everybody, to another Clean Facts Know-How webinar of incredible importance. And I think just banger after banger after banger the series has been so far in the future of training. And this one, I'm excited because we have got some experts in the industry to talk about the topic of microlearning. And how come as workers continue to evolve their expectations, how they get trained up in their free time, how workplaces that are serious about training and development need to adapt to that. And so we've got some all-star people on the roster today. And so let's just jump right into introductions. If you guys wouldn't mind kicking it off with name, company that you work with, your role there, and where you're from, and maybe just 30 seconds on what motivated you to get into training and development, and really excited to dive in to what the future of training looks like and how microlearning is a part of it. Bobby, I'll start with you first.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Bobby Jo Burnett. I am located in Sherwood, Arkansas, and I am the training and onboarding manager at First Team. I've been in the industry for over 20 years, and that's a long time, and I've loved every minute of it. And I started literally as a temp through a temp agency and just kind of worked my way up the chain to a GM and did it for quite some time. And was getting to a point where it's like, as much as I like telling people what to do, I really, really enjoy telling people how to do it and showing them how to do it was really kind of starting to become a passion of mine. Because when you spend so much time in the industry, you get so much experience and you learn so much and you know so much. And so I really wanted to be able to share all of my knowledge and everything that was in this brain with more than just my team, right? I wanted to expand. And so I found the perfect opportunity to do that here at First Team. And so here I am.
Incredible. Hey, thanks, Bobby. I'm excited to dive into all 20 years of your experience as we go more into this subject. Cameron, how about yourself?
Hi there, Cameron McBurnett. I'm from Waco, Texas. I work for Rainbow Restoration as a network performance manager. I've been in the industry since 2012. I actually started as a QA specialist where I was reviewing claims, so it really came into training kind of by necessity. In that role, I had to become knowledgeable of IICRC standards, carrier guidelines, estimating, drawing software, all of that. And so I really wanted to become more of a resource for our team and provide value to our owners. So I took it upon myself to learn like every process, every workflow that we had, every click that you're going to have to make throughout that job, so the job progresses. And so in that, I've, started to document my efforts and then became a trainer and really trained to our systems and refined our workflows to make sure that our teams are the most efficient they could be. And again, in that, I found my passion for teaching, and I never thought that I would get to that point, just because I had a hard time with even public speaking, growing up. So I got kind of thrown into that, and I've enjoyed it. And happy to talk about microlearning and the process that we use.
Awesome. Cameron, thanks very much. Excited to dive in a little bit deeper there. Leighton, we'll throw it to you.
Well, hey, folks, Leighton Healy, CEO at Know How. And, my background has come from just building teams of service companies. I've been a franchise owner. I've been kind of an independent trades company owner. I've been a franchisor with hundreds of locations. And all along the while, the challenge has always been just how do you just pragmatically build systems that account for the reality of these deskless workforces. People need to learn their jobs. People need to be able to solve problems independently. And fundamentally, how do you do that just in the face of knowledge retention rates, changing technology landscape, and let's be honest, the promises that we make to our customers, our major accounts, and even the promises we make to that individual sitting across the interview table that they will be trained, they will be supported, they will be guided, knowing that looking at my calendar, I'm just going to be in 100 places. And how will I, in a sense, tangibly provide this person with a rich training experience. It's complicated. And so just my lived experience is some of the genesis behind kind of leaning into a solution. And so, I lead the team at Know How, where we are very passionate about really how do you, we would say, help service companies deliver what they promise with confident workers. And so I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Hey, very excited for this discussion. And thank you to everyone who's attending. Please feel free to let us know where you're tuning in from in the chat. And we hope by the end of this webinar, if you have ever sat in frustration and said, how come I cannot get my workers to care about the training that I put in front of them when I put so much effort into it, yet they seem to have no problem watching TikToks on how to replace the cabin air filter in their car, or watching YouTube videos and gaining new skills. Yet as soon as I put a computer in front of them, their eyes seem to roll into the back of their head. Over the course of the next 55 minutes or so, we hope to make a little bit of progress on that problem by some of the best in the industry who have spent a lot of time thinking about this. So very excited that you're joining us. Bobby, I want to start with you, and then I'm going to go to you, Cameron, and then you, Leighton. Let's start with some vision casting by just understanding where we're at in history. So if we rewind 30 years ago, restorers were trained with big binders on a desk, the dreaded operations manual, 300 pages, 400 pages, dog-eared, all musty, and then just job shadowing out in the field. I think maybe 10 years ago, let's say, we collectively as an industry said there's opportunities for improvement than just, dropping a 400-page binder on someone's lap the day they join our company might not be the best way to do it. And so if we were to take a timestamp 10 years ago, it looked like long form desktop-based video training. Let's go 2 or 3 years in the future. Bobby, what should training look like in the cleaning and restoration industry?
I think in our industry specifically, training isn't going to be something that you're going to go do. It's going to be something that happens while you're doing that thing, right? So training is going to eventually catch up for how fast our workday moves. And so it's not necessarily that we're creating more training, it's just better training with microlearning. And so, yeah, definitely it's going to be something that happens while you do it, not something that you have to go do.
That's such an interesting distinction. I think that's very cool. I'm excited to explore that a little bit further. Training is something that's happening while you're doing it versus an event that happens before you do it. Very interesting. Cameron, how about yourself? What should training look like over the course of the next 3 years? Where do we need to go to as an industry?
Yeah, and I think a lot of this it's here. I think we are in the future in a lot of these instances, but I think it's become more accessible where you can get your training anytime, anywhere, and the different options for training are going to be more versatile, where you have multiple ways, for a subject or a lesson to be searched or obtained or even assigned. So, kind of speaking to, I know what Bobby mentioned was that you'll get that training kind of while you're doing whatever process you're actually doing in the field. I think that we're going to see to where you're going to have things that you need to quickly find something that maybe you have already received training for, that you need to recall it, or you are searching for something for the first time, and maybe we do have that process that you have not gone through yet. So just a quick way to find that, and I think you're going to have to utilize AI to do that and really have a knowledge bank that can be pulled from, and really a single source. So where you're not having to go into different platforms to find that content. I think that's been a limiting factor in the past where learners didn't know where to go to find that content. In addition to that, I think we're going to see a lot more collaboration, and that's internally and externally. I think we're going to see where you start to really leverage your experts that are in your network to produce the content for you, and also share that with other, locations so that it's something that is available to everybody. But also externally, where you have, your strategic partners that actually provide that content for you in your training system. So I think that that's probably where it's headed.
Awesome. Well, hey, we're going to go a little bit deeper into this, but Cameron, some of the things that I drew out from what you were saying, just in time training, powered by AI, single source of truth, where and it's hey, if it takes a village to raise a child, it probably takes an entire community of vendors to properly train a new water technician. And so I think those are some great bullet points there. Leighton, how about yourself? What's the vision? Where do we need to go to over the next 3 years to match the moment of being able to best train workers entering into the field?
Last night I was flying back from speaking at an event, and I'm trying to, get some work done. And my willpower wasn't great, because I kept kind of like goosenecking my seatmate who's watching
Hmm.
Master Chef, right? He's watching Master Chef, and everyone's going crazy working with their ingredients. And I think we could probably all relate to some type of cooking show where they have these surprise ingredients. Like they lift the dish and it's like wasabi, no, right? And it's a dessert, no, right? And so, there's these inputs and we have to work with the inputs that we have. And one of the things that I've learned over the years of just building learning organizations, building learning departments, is that oftentimes the mind and the people that go into those kind of learning design type roles, they have a preference. They bring that preference to the table when they think about how we should build and archetype this system and architect this system. And sometimes they start, in a sense, planning, in a sense, a menu that doesn't reflect the reality of the inputs, or let's call it the ingredients, that the incoming workforce actually is serving up. And so to me, when I think about the future, I don't think we I think we make a massive mistake by not really considering the learner reality and essentially what are the design implications of the learner reality. So for example, I'll just give you three things that I think about. So for example, in the blue collar kind of service industry, that's where my passion is. Um, a lot of the workers coming into those industries, especially on frontline roles, are generally coming from lower to middle income homes. And for example, when you look at, the prevalence of those homes owning, say, desktops versus the home is completely reliant on mobile devices. I mean, the rates are really high towards mobile device, and it's increasingly higher. It's increasingly becoming the case that a lot of these young people actually they don't have like a laptop or a desktop computer at home. Their home is a complete, mobile environment. So why does that matter? Well, oftentimes our training programs, especially, if they require that worker to do some stuff at home, are generally built on systems that are oriented towards the device preference of the design team, right? The learning team. And they say, well, I sit in my office with three monitors and it's super comfortable. I got air conditioning, I got my fancy mouse, and let's build this. Not realizing that actually sometimes the people who do the work don't even have access to it. We hear stories of individuals where the owner, every time they hire someone, they literally take the owner's laptop and they put it in a workroom so that the technicians who just got hired earlier that day, can sit and go through courses. So meaning that the owner's laptop, with the access to everything that's on an owner's laptop, right, is in a room with individuals who've been there for no less than an hour. And their productivity is inhibited. So we have to think about the reality of just technology preference for workforces coming from primarily, middle to lower income homes. The next thing we have to think about is attention spans. And I think one of the things that's just one of the cruelest realities to people that are passionate about building rich, vibrant on brand training is attention spans and the reality of attention spans. And I think we all know that call it Gen Z, even reach back to Gen Alpha, workers who in the coming years are going to be recipients of whatever training architecture we put in place, their attention spans aren't great. And so the idea of microlearning is this idea of how do we to kind of, in a sense, Bobby's point was, I think she hit it on the head, is we have to say, look, we can't think about learning as this moment that is then retained, right? We have to think about it as within the constructs of, device and format matters. We have to consider for retention, and we also have to consider for, how are our workers in non-compensated environments using technology to solve complex knowledge obstacles. Whether it's making sourdough bread or working on their dad's hot rod or figuring out what they're going to do with their friends that weekend. How do they use technology to solve problems for which they don't know the answer? Because that is a strong behavioral preference. And when you're trying to fight behavior wins.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. By the way, my favorite method of watching the White Lotus has been over the shoulder of the person in front of me on the airport. I think in the airplane. I think I've seen about half of the first season that way. So yeah, no, I,
Oh
I
yeah.
I resonate with that. Yeah, mobile first homes. When you grow up in a mobile first home, that's just your preferred method of consuming content, right? Especially if you've got a short attention span. We'll probably talk about it a little bit more. TikTok, YouTube Shorts. You can rail against those platforms all you want. Well, it doesn't matter because your incoming workforce has been shaped by content like that. And so, like Leighton said, you've got a square peg, which is how I have been receiving content all my life, and then this round hole of how, as a trainer, do I want to present this information? And getting those two to fit together has been the cause of a lot of frustration. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the blend of, let's say, micro learning, desktop-based training, in-person training. I think we can agree, it takes more than 60 seconds to like properly train someone up. Maybe the title of this webinar was a little controversial, but the idea is that, hey, the long extended session where you're sitting in front of a computer for the first week on the job, I think we can all agree that's not working for today's young workforce. At the same time, handing a worker a phone with TikTok on it and said, "All right, get your WRT this way." That's not going to work either. And in person, while we all agree in person is awesome, it's not scalable, it's expensive. There's a lot of barriers there. Bobby, from your perspective, what is the right balance? How do we lean into the strengths of all these different ways of training while acknowledging the weaknesses and bringing them together in a way that works best for today's worker?
Yeah, I really love this topic because I feel like in our industry, I refer to training kind of like fitness. You can't do a couple of workouts every now and then and expect to get results. You've got to have that consistency and you've got to have some variety in the type of trainings that you're doing, right? So if we think about our in-person trainings, man, that is gold. In-person training to me is gold. It's where you start building that culture with your teams or with your organization. It's where you start building confidence. It's where you really get to explain the whys of what we're doing. And so you got to have the in-person training. Desktop training builds kind of the what, right? It's you take them over here, you set them down in front of the computer and you let them watch that hour-long video or the 2-hour-long video, whatever it is. And that's building the what are you doing? But the micro learning, those short little burst TikTok style videos, that really kind of starts teaching you the how right there in the moment, right? And so you've got to have a perfect blend of all of those. I think each one of them are super important. But you've got to start thinking too about doing the right type of learning at the right time that learning needs to be had, right? Do we need in-person training right now? Can we do the short microburst, the short micro learning type, or do they need to sit in front of a desktop? So finding that balance and blending them all together, blending them to me is what sticks. Start with your live immersion, start with that live in-person training to build that confidence and that really team feel, and reinforce that training with your desktop modules possibly, but then start embedding those short reminders directly into their workflow on a daily basis with exactly what Know How does for us.
Awesome. Oh, that's great. And so what I heard, the why, the what, the how, using all different mediums that you have to explain those. We've probably all heard growing up, you've got different learning styles, right? You've got people who like reading, you got people who like hearing, you got kinesthetic learners doing. And a lot of research actually has been done in the last 5 years that's calling into question that thing that we've all been taught. And what it's said is it's not necessarily, oh, these people just like doing, these people just like reading. It's, hey, when you have different learning styles woven together, it goes deeper, right? It's not like, well, I just don't like doing, and so that didn't stick with me. It's like, well, when you can supplement doing with reading, with watching, with talking about it, the stickiness, the knowledge retention is so much deeper than just watching a video once. Bobby, I think that's such a great way to blend all of those together for maximum retention. Cameron, how do you guys think about this, about blending all the different methods that are at your disposal in order to optimize for long-term retention and confidence and competence among your staff?
Yeah, I agree. It is, it can be blended different ways. But, I think that, the desktop or self-paced training is really utilized for our foundational knowledge. And you have some versatility there where you all spoke to this, where you have the videos or pictures or documents that can accompany instructions to account for those different learning styles. Not everybody learns by being able to read, detailed instructions. Some like to watch the video, but having both available can be very helpful. I also like to use that self-paced or desktop training kind of as a prerequisite to in-person training. That way, when you're doing that in-person training, you're not spending all that valuable time learning the basics, and you can really start to get, the critical hands-on training. You can discuss the complex ideas or processes, and really anything that maybe has some nuance, or you need to receive some feedback, maybe some question and answer on. I think it's very important for that part of it. And you really can't beat face-to-face interactions. That's really one of the best ways to learn and get that hands-on training. And for the micro-learning, we really focus that more on, that quick, concise, or training that maybe reinforces something that they've previously learned, or if you want to focus on a specific topic. Now, as far as our blend, I'd say probably 15 to 20% maybe in-person training, while the other 80 or so percent is, for that self-paced or that micro learning. And I lump those together because, the way I like to create it is I like to create that long form training and then actually take that training and turning into micro learning segments where a person can actually, search for that specific topic and get that answer real quick, or see that specific process and not have to sit there and view the entire module. But you can kind of knock out two birds with one stone there if you just convert that long-term training into those little smaller segments that can be searched.
Awesome. I think that's such an important principle, right? I think micro-learning is best if it's reinforcing existing knowledge. And you can imagine a curve, this is called the forgetting curve, where you're taught something and your knowledge of it goes way up. And then over time, if anyone who's like crammed for an exam knows exactly what this is like. It like slowly goes down over time. Sometimes if it's me after an exam, it's like half an hour after the exam, it just goes like that. Unless you're constantly being reminded of it, right? Unless you've got those little micro learnings, little short little bursts, getting you to recall that information. Overall, the retention over time is way, way higher. Leighton, anything that you would add as far as the right balance, how we should think about complementing all these different methods of learning as we look to equip incoming workers who are just, like we said, trained to consume content in a different way?
I've spent enough time in my career like training and leading training to know that I've made the mistake of making success as the trainer, my work, my staff or my team or individuals going through training, that if they can leave the room and say, "Oh, I feel overwhelmed," or that was like, I was like, drinking from a fire hose. I took that as affirmation that I had done my job. I had essentially, volume and quantity. Quantity had a quality all its own, right? And I have had to reorient myself in terms of what success looks like, because one of the primary factors is that there's been so much great like just overall, I would say, research done on the workforce, especially on the workforce coming in. So kind of those late stage millennials and those Gen Zs coming in. Gen Zs are kind of, anyone who's kind of like 25 or under who's legally employed right now is kind of in that Gen Z. And what you're seeing is you're seeing a rise in reluctance to basically take on more responsibility. And you're like, what is driving that reluctance? I mean, half. Like, I flew in last night, and there was a gentleman that I was chatting with, and he's a senior partner with Deloitte, and so kind of put me on like a Deloitte research bender last night as I was waiting for my baggage. And there's a report that they put out on the workforce that said more than half of Gen Z workers report intentionally avoiding any type of career track towards a management role, right? More than half. And one of the stated reasons behind it is because they feel that the company lacks the training and the support resources and the infrastructure needed to set them up for success. So one of the questions you have to ask yourself is, when we finally get around to really modernizing our training, we'll just start training our people. Well, let's call it the lack of, let's call it of innovation, and let's call it just dose of reality in your approach to training, is in a sense dulling or even removing the incoming workforce appetite to consider putting their hand up for management roles. And it's interesting where part of the study indicated that one third, right, one third of staff said that their company's training is so out of date that they don't trust it. So meaning that they're just clicking through things in a sense to jump through boxes, so they're not being trained. And so I think we also have to factor in, cold comfort. I like to say, cold comfort is this idea that it's a blanket that doesn't hold warmth. And sometimes our learning approaches are cold comfort. It's really around giving us the sense that they went through training and that means something. So I really think that the opportunity is for us as trainers to in a sense adjust what success is for us. I think a good example of success is, how many obstacles, opportunities, or outcomes did that individual solve independently to company standard, say X number of weeks post training. I think as well, the ability for us to be able to really delve into how much micro content was consumed prior to training. So rather than us opening up the books and this is the first time I get to melt your brain and the first time you get to learn all this. No, in many ways, the on-ramp towards that in-person learning started weeks ago, and really they're coming in and we're really handling kind of to what Bobby was saying, is that now we're in training. So we're going to really talk about the what and the why. Um, and I'm very bullish on really understanding that workers nowadays seem to have a reluctance factor, meaning that I have a high reluctance to look like a dummy on the job site, and I will throw my company under the bus more than previous generations, meaning, I'm sorry, ma'am, no one told me how to do this. I'm just going to wait for my supervisor to call me. Customer trust corroding. You know what I'm saying? And they're like, it's not my fault. actually we're in this together. You're under supported as a customer. I'm under supported as a worker. So let's just kind of wait here until, basically help arrives. That's just the reality of it. And so to me, as trainers, we have to think about how do we really think about arming these people to feel confident on the job sites. So there's a lot in that, but again, master chef, we just got to deal with the ingredients that are underneath that steel bowl.
And I wonder what analogies we would have gotten if you like were watching like a murder mystery or something instead over someone's shoulder yesterday. But this is working great.
I probably would have laced it together. It would.
That's funny. But I mean, Leighton, the statistics that you talked about are not just like, oh, that's interesting. I would say it's alarming, right? If 50%
Mhm.
of Gen Z workers say, I don't want a
Mhm.
management role, and a third
Yeah.
say, I don't trust the training, that's not just like,
Mhm.
oh, how do we solve this? That's like, that is an impending leadership crisis in a
Mhm.
company that needs to be
Yeah.
solved quickly.
Yeah. And the language was 52% intentionally avoiding management opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. And man, and talk those companies, they still need to exist 10 years from now. And so, what's the plan, right? We have to either just, get until just hire all the millennials until the millennials are gone, or we have to figure out a way to deliver training to Gen Z workers in a way that works for them. And so I want to explore that more. And Leighton, I think that you've made a very clear case. We've all, I think, identified opportunities to improve training. And so when we look at the restoration industry today, how come so many companies are reluctant to modify their approach? If we've identified this big problem that exists, this mismatch between how workers want to be trained and how they're actually getting trained, and we've like, I think we've made a clear case that, hey, the future of a lot of companies are at stake if we don't figure this out. The opportunities are clear. Leighton, I'll throw it to you first, and then we'll go Cameron and Bobby. How come more companies are not modifying their approach?
Well, I mean, I have the advantage of, you know, having looked behind the scenes of a major report that just came out a week and a half ago called The Cost of Doing Business in Restoration, which really paints a very sobering picture of the financial reality of most restorers. I mean, the audience here is primarily those leading cleaning and those leading restoration companies. And so I have a lot of empathy for restorers where they say, yeah, a lot of this sounds like what I would say is that I think a lot of listeners are probably going to say, I get it, I'm in, but I'm so crushed. I'm in a cash crunch. I don't have a lot of time. I'm really in a position where I agree. We need to provide this, but fundamentally, where's the time? Like, where's this hypothetical eighth day of the week that I'm going to have to do all this? And so, to me, I think that that's where I think that I mean, insert AI generative solutions, right? That ability of saying, I mean, this is one of the things I'm very passionate about. Know-how is how do you turn any demonstration, any like, you know what? Okay, let me just show you how to do it. Okay, all right, everybody, I'm going to show you how to do it. How do you just turn that, do it once, into now perennial training content? And I mean, and I put my money where my mouth is. We've put a lot of cash into creating solutions where it's just like Rodrigo knows how to do it. Everyone pay attention to Rodrigo, and somebody point, this AI app at Rodrigo, and then as soon as he's done, now it's been parceled into training content. It's translated into different languages. I mean, how do you solve this? I think if we were to if this was like a movie, it would just be set to some, dreary background music. It seems so hopeless. And then like an asteroid would land with a new mineral that like solves this. And I think that new mineral has showed up and it's basically language model based and generative AI. And the restorers that are leveraging it are being able to say, look, pragmatically, it's easiest for me just to show up and fix the machine myself. But man, if someone could just somehow, in a sense, turn that into my training guide, hot dog, right? So I think that is we have to realize businesses like it's not that they have tons of cash to throw at it. They don't have tons of time to throw at it. And so I think it has to be a much more just a much more realistic approach that considers for the limitations and yet provides an innovative solution that's not cumbersome and ideally doesn't require them to become a learning expert or a training expert. Um,
Mhm.
so, that's not a full answer, but that's how I think about it.
I want to call a bit of an audible here. And Bobby, before the conversation, before we went live, you and I were talking about what next week looks like. And I don't know if your ears are burning, but as Leighton was describing like how much easier it is these days to create training content thanks to AI. I was just recalling how you were telling me what your itinerary is next week. So let's
Yeah.
ground it a little bit. Could you just walk through that a little bit with everyone on the call today?
Yeah, so we've been digging into know-how a lot, and we're building lots of great content. And I'm super excited with the direction that we're going in know-how, the engagement that we've gotten from our different offices across the country in know-how. But they're screaming at me, and they're demanding videos. We
Mm.
need videos. They like the step-by-step tutorials. They like the, what we have in there. And there are videos in there, but there's not a ton. And so with the help of AI and the amazing work that the know-how team has been doing in the software, it is so amazing to be able to shoot a video and allow Know-how's AI to break that video down. And our offices, our audience in Know-how is eating it up. They are absolutely loving it and they're demanding more and more. And so I will be traveling next week to
Hmm.
shoot a ton of videos to start getting uploaded into Know-how for my audience because it's what they want, it's what they need, and it's what's keeping them engaged. And I'm going to give them what they want. If that's what they want, then that's what they're going to get, as long as they're staying engaged, as long as they're continuing to learn and improve and build that confidence. Yeah, that's what we're doing.
Awesome. And
A-
Bobby,
And I'll just plus one what Bobby just said because I was reading a report last week. 77, according to that research firm's report, 77% of millennials, 78% of Gen Zs prefer learning-based training over traditional kind of like template or like PowerPoint driven training. So I mean, just a big plus one to what Bobby's saying.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and Bobby, you and I didn't talk about this. You're going to Memphis next week, and you're renting out full camera crew, lights, production, and Steven Spielberg is directing. Is that correct, or is it just
Yeah,
you and I,
I mean
Sean?
that's the budget that I have with First Team, right? No, I'm going to use my nifty little iPhone 17 Pro to shoot these videos on a tripod. So I might
Awesome.
get a ring light if I'm lucky, right?
Okay. Hey, and I mean that's a testament, right, to how easy it is.
Yeah.
Everyone has an iPhone in their pocket, and to be able to take that and turn that into step-by-step learning with AI, it's the barriers to getting good micro learning that reinforces what people are taught, have never been lower. Cameron, from your perspective, what are some of the other barriers where someone might be watching this webinar and saying, "Oh, it sounds great, but what about this? What about this?" Like Layton said, always in that important but not urgent bucket. What are some of the barriers there, and how should companies reframe their thinking?
Yeah, so I think, the perceived time constraints is definitely, there. I think the belief that it's going to take so much time and resources to produce the content is going to be disruptive to my business. And in reality, in some cases, it could be where the person that's conducting the training may have a lot of, wear a lot of hats in the company. And so breaking out of that routine and really finding a way to get kind of unstuck where you're not doing, things the way you've always done them, that can be a challenge. But I think I said perceived time constraints, and just to give you a little example here, like it took me a month to create a piece of content before, where it was, written instructions, it was videos and everything. And I remember just thinking like, God, I wish there was a quick way where I could just pull this in and it would just write this thing for me. And, that is a reality now. Something that took me a month, and I mean, literally a month to produce and get into our LMS, now takes minutes. And so I think that a lot of the time constraints are being lifted, but I think, that's really probably one of the biggest pieces, that one of the biggest things that makes people reluctant to make that change. So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest piece.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and if I could just comment quickly. So now that like Cam, you've solved for, let's call it, like speed of content production. And I know I speak for a lot of my fellow kind of learning and designers. I mean, some of us, we're perfectionists as well, right? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so we have to consider for that. But to me, once time to produce content has been, in a sense, reduced to something that is, so simple. It's just like the difference between sending a letter by Falcon versus sending it by email. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's been a state change. So then what is the next challenge? And some of the things that I think about, I wonder how you think about it, is when there is a knowledge that content can be created rapidly, instantly, then I think the next battle is going to be around recency. Is this the best of the best, and truthfulness, or like trustworthiness? Like there's like the next challenge. And so for you, as someone who has a brilliant mind for developing, training systems and content, now that you can create content so rapidly, what do you think is the next challenge?
Really for us, it's been really focusing on what our internal teams want. So
Mm.
not just making content for the sake of making content, really having a focus where we can dive into what our teams are wanting to learn, or our higher priority. Now, this also just kind of made me think about, one of the things that I love about it too is that, if you're creating your content within know-how, Bobby's could record it on her phone and she could go put that into the system. Once it's there, you can make edits from there, and you don't have multiple versions of that same, you know, piece of learning within the same system. So it updates in real time. So they're getting those updates in real time. I think that that's one of the biggest benefits of, the focus area of once content's in there, you can quickly make adjustments as needed. But biggest challenge is just finding those focus areas, making sure that you're not just making content for the sake of content.
And I think that's such a great point to emphasize, right? Especially if you think about training and learning development all day, then sometimes the content can become an end in itself over time. And you don't even realize that it's happened, right? So I want to take a second to go back to the outcomes. Why do we care about lightweight content? Why do we care about micro learning? Why do we care about meeting the worker where they're at? Well, it's because we've got outcomes that we're trying to go to. We're trying to improve the skills of our team. We're trying to deliver exceptional experiences to our customers. We're trying to help retain our staff longer. And when they show up competent and confident every day, they've got a higher likelihood of wanting to come back and do it again tomorrow. So, Bobby, I'll throw it to you first. What impact has having the lightweight, frequent touch points, micro learning, this agile approach, just in time learning, what impact has that had on employee retention, skill development, customer experience? What difference is it making at First Team?
I think it's been a game changer for us here at First Team and across our organization. When we first started using the shorter, more consistent training touch points at First Team, the engagement was there, right? And people started looking forward to the learning instead of dreading it. They weren't like, oh my gosh, I've got to watch another video. It was, hey, I've signed you a process. Go take a look at it. And they're like, yeah, sure. Pull out the phone right then, open it up, boom, done. So there was so much more engagement. It's also had an impact on being able, I don't spend so much time on the phone answering repeated questions, right? Someone calling over and over and over again, wanting to know this, that multiple people asking the same question over and over again. There's a know-how for that, right? So we have seen a difference in the retention because the style of the training that we're providing is more attractive to today's workforce. People are sticking around longer. I received the most amazing email just the other day from a new hire at one of our locations. I was helping her set up her know-how account and just kind of introducing her to it. And a few days later, she replied back to me. She's like, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. You guys really seem to have your stuff together. I can't wait to tell people about this learning platform. I mean, it made me feel really good because we've put a lot of work into it. So and people see you investing your time and your energy and experience into their growth, they kind of get a little bit more buy-in and they want to stay around a little bit longer. And so it's definitely been a game changer for us here at First Team.
Awesome.
And I'll just jump on what Bobby, because I bet Bobby that I think you would agree with this, is that I've had the opportunity to go like a couple steps a little like after that person say comments on the company's commitment and investment in training, because I think if we were to put a microphone on what most of our sometimes what staff talk about around, they go to the pub after work, or they go hang out with their friends at the movie theater, or whatever people do on the weekends. Um, it's very common that the topic of conversation is like they gripe about work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen with some of the organizations that I've been able to have the pleasure of working closely with is, we've seen their source of new candidates just explosively move towards referral to the point where it's almost uncommon to get an applicant who's not referral. And a very common thing that they'll say is, well, I was at the pub, or I was out for, grabbing something to eat, or I was hanging out at the mall with my friend, and when I was belly aching, they just were taking this, well, that's not how they do it at my company, or my company, it's like this, or this is this. And they said, I just want to be part of that. Because when you take a step forward towards being, I think, a more modern, to use Travis's term, a more agile company from a learning and development, you not only, I think, experience those benefits, but you become, at least for a little while now, maybe for the next 12 to 24 months, you become an outlier.
Mm-hmm.
And staff talk about work a lot outside of work.
Yeah.
And to be able to shift the narrative, and then in a sense to kind of turn that into a referral machine. I mean, man, I got to tell you, like when you come to work and you work with your friends and you enjoy your place of work, you stick around,
Yeah,
right? You stick around.
for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And the benefits, it goes beyond retention, right? Referrals, a lot of these other
Mhm.
hiring and attracting, hiring, retaining top talent, those problems, you chip away at those when you've got good training and development. Cameron, how about yourself? What are some of the impacts that you've seen because you've invested in learning? What are the downstream effects of taking this approach of a lightweight, frequent touch points, micro learning, and just investing in always making sure that this training stays front of mind for your staff?
Yeah. I know we had a kind of a testimonial, I guess you say, that when with one of our owners that came through, and all you could, I mean, he was ecstatic about it, but really what I sensed was a bunch of relief from their side. They spent a lot of time with their teams and coaching them and getting them to learn. And so this has allowed them, to really provide their teams with more resources that's actually catered to their roles. And so that's been a really big benefit. And it allows them to be more engaged and more confident in their job, after going through these. Um, I think a lot of it has to do too with not with the micro learning and just like smaller segments. It's not as daunting and it's less stressful for the team members, which just promotes a much better learning experience for all those employees. So I think that that's been a huge plus.
Very cool. Yep. Yeah. And it's not always in the areas that you think, right? It's those testimonials, it's those referrals. And like Leighton said, if they're saying it to you, they're saying it to their buddies at the pub or
Mhm.
they're saying it online. And that's where you start to get the snowball effect rolling down the hill of good training and development. Let's start to shift now. We're rounding, getting close to the top of the hour here, and there's been a lot of good advice given. There's been lots of perspective on how we can shift towards, instead of thinking of training of a single event. Bobby, I really like that fitness analogy of you can't just go to the gym twice and say, great, now I'm healthy. It is a lifelong process of building in those habits. Someone's listening to this, they have the ability to shape and influence the training and development program at their company. What's that first step, right? To use that gym analogy, get your gym shorts, go to the gym once, do light weights. You don't have to, you don't have to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger tomorrow. Just start to build the habit, get some familiarity. What are those first steps, Cameron? I'll throw it to you.
I think first of all, don't get overwhelmed. It may seem like a monumental effort, getting either transitioning from one platform to another or producing more and better training content. But just give it some thought. Find the things that are critical in your business that you need to, have a process for or some training for, or maybe even some low-hanging fruit that you can get knocked out and focus on one piece at a time. It starts with, I don't want to use that same analogy, but it starts with one task. Once you accomplish that, you can change that into a process. Once that process is built, you can start to build out your workflows. And then pretty soon you'll have, your entire, training platform set up. And so I'd also say, make sure you get some feedback from your team, the people that you are teaching. What do they want to learn about? I also think that you want to ask them what they maybe don't like about your current processes, or ask what they think about how your training is currently conducted. So taking that feedback, that'll help not only help you in designing how you're going to lay out your platform, but also getting that buy-in where they don't really feel just, that they're involved in the process, but where they actually have a stake in that process.
Awesome. Yeah, Bobby, I'm curious. Same question for you. What is a good starting point, a half step in the right direction if someone's like, I want to go deeper in this. I see the results. Where do I start?
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree with Cameron any more. He hit it dead on, right? You've got to start small. You don't go to the gym and immediately deadlift too many pounds, right? You got to start small and work your way up there. And so start with a process. What is your pain point? Right? What is something that just really irks you that you wish would be standard and consistent across the board, and create that process. And like Cameron said, share it with your team. Get their feedback. That feedback creates collaboration. The collaboration is going to create the buy-in that Cameron referred to. Right now, they feel bought in because they're being able to collaborate with you. Pick a process, right? Is it, how to roll an extension cord? I don't know, something simple. And again, build into it. Now it's a standard step, right? It's something super simple, but one person's rolling it on their arm like this, the other person's doing this method, someone else is doing this. We want it to be the same across the board. Create that process, share it with the team, and then let the team tell you what they want, right? Because you've created that collaboration, you've created the trust, in doing this, and just start small. Don't try to create your whole library at one time or in one day or in one week. Start small and build onto it. Um, and don't build content just to have content, as Cameron said earlier, either. That becomes a mess. I know from experience, it gets a little messy when you do that. Have intentional training, intentional processes in there, so that your team logs into a system that is attractive to them, that they want to continue to log into.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Leighton, let me throw it to you. If day 365, day 720 looks like higher retention, confident employees, referrals coming in from all over the place, what does day one look like?
I think day one, you have to remove from your mind this idea that we have that to build kind of a robust training offering, it's going to be laborious and it's going to be all this work. I mean, I think that those problems have been solved. Hey, I mean, I have, you know, I have teams that focus on making that problem go away. So then what do you do if that's not a big problem? I think what you do is number one, you you make sure everyone in your team knows that no one's going to get in trouble, and then you take time to get them to text you, send them a little anonymous survey, and ask them the following questions. Thinking back to your first 60 days on the job, give me some examples of things that were surprisingly unclear, or it was actually a negative part of your experience that it took you so long to learn this? Or give me one example of something where you honestly felt unsupported on. Like just give me some examples of what you remember when you got started. Because one, if you create that sense of basically security that you're not going to be in trouble, they will just give it to you. They'll be like, yeah, you made me feel like a dummy, or I was left out to dry, or I was all by myself. And so what you thought was just a nice little feedback might turn into a bit of a therapy session, but understand that give your staff the permission to kind of point at some holes in what is the Swiss cheese of how you currently support them. Secondly, you have to learn how to be able to get the competent members of your team on board, because at the end of the day, how do you make sure that that individual that's been working for you for say X amount of years isn't a detractor? And what you do is you help them understand that for them to take on more, to make more, they need to become someone who in a sense can be now a facilitator of high performers, and that requires them to spend less time fixing, re-explaining, and training, and more time equipping and delegating. And a tool, a proper training tool, allows those high performers to spend more time performing and less time babysitting. And you say, look, I'm not going to try to twist your arm and get you the great content and whatnot. What I want is I want you to do more of what you love, just cruising through work. I want you to make it easier to move the tedious things off your plate to the new guys. And number three is I think actually you've figured some things out, and I actually think you should help us to inform our standards. I'll tell you, those individuals like, okay, so this isn't like how you're just trying to reteach me. No, no, no. This is how I want to let you loose, right? And they're like, okay, well,
Mhm.
I hear what you're talking about. And then the final thing is that there's no ifs and buts. When you're trying to create an organization that is building the learning commitment that both Bobby and Cameron are talking about, leadership's got to be all in. Leadership's got to be all in. And knowledge will always follow the path of least resistance. And if you establish a knowledge base and yet the boss will always pick up her phone or always pick up his phone, at the end of the day, the questions will always go to the path of least resistance. And so you have to have a commitment from leadership, commitment to management to say, hey, once we have created a resource, a way for team members to solve that problem to standard independently, we have to commit as a group. Let's look at the whites of our eyes together to say we're going to redirect that to say, did you look at the company's tool, right? So there's more layers to it, but again, I think you need to create an opportunity for team members to speak to where they felt unsupported. You need to get your high contributors on board to understand contextually how this is of value to them. And you got to get leadership on board.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the good news. we all agree because we care about training. Like Bobby said, it's not a single event. You don't have to be perfect day one. The same principle applies for your training program, right? You don't have to get it perfect tomorrow. And so this iterative approach of learning as we go, refining as we go, improving it as we go, that's how you're going to get to that day 365, day 720, where you're retaining your staff. Your skill development is way higher. Referrals are coming in. It's through a mix of microlearning, in-person training, longer form content. And the fact that you're here on this webinar is a great first step. It shows a commitment to training and getting better, which is what we obviously care so much about being in this field. Thanks everyone for joining us. Bobby, Cameron, Leighton, thanks for your expertise and your perspective. If you're watching this, this will be sent out later. You also will be able to find it on YouTube. But we appreciate everyone giving us an hour of your day today. We hope that it's helpful. This was not an example of microlearning. This was an hour-long video, but we hope that there were some nuggets in here as well. So thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye.